Like, seriously, who are the Cowboys at this point?
That's a great question.
Because, like, it is a question I have been really grappling with today.
It is a great question, by the way. And the best part, the thing I think I like about that the most is that I cover the team. I should be an expert on this team. But you know who should be above me and as an expert on this team? The players. And if you ask them that question and went around the locker room, I don't think that they would even be able to tell you right now. I don't think they know for sure what they are. That Washington game was jarring. That should never happen. That's not just a worst game this year. This is the worst game they've played the last 2 years, as far as I'm concerned. And to have it at this time, right before you're, that's been the talk since training camp. That it was like, this season will be. This season will be decided by what they do in the postseason, and to have that to be your game right before you go into the postseason, I never thought that they could play that poorly with their starters in the game, especially against that Washington team that was out on the field. They're just inexcusable the way that they played, and sure that they have bounced back from all their losses this year, and I do think they'll play much better Monday night in Tampa. But to play like that right before you go in the playoffs. For anybody to watch them on Sunday, if you watch that entire game and you say, nah, they're fine, they're about to make a deep playoff run, you're lying to yourself.
It's funny because we have watched this team throughout the course of 17 games this year, and there are times when this team has looked like a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and there are times where we scratch our heads and say, how in the world is a team like this winning 12 games this year? And now they go to take on a Tampa Bay Buccaneer team that has had a very up and down year, but at the same time playing a quarterback that has never lost to this team. What should give Cowboys fans confidence that the one team that we saw, for example, against Minnesota is going to be the one that shows up against Tampa Bay on Monday night?
Well, I mean, this isn't your Tampa Bay team of the last couple of years. I think it's arguably the worst team that Tom Brady has played on. He's obviously had some pretty good teams that he's been on throughout his career, and this might be the worst one. So you're going against a team on paper that, one, is nowhere near as talented as that Vikings team was going into that game, and they play in a venue that's nowhere near as daunting as that Vikings venue. So if you can do what you did in that Vikings game against the Buccaneers, you can win this game by 2 touchdowns or more. The problem is, though, is that Vikings game seems like it was a long time ago, and ever since then, they almost play like they've been coasting since then. Like they showed the world that, hey, we're ready for the playoffs. We are a team to be reckoned with. We are a team that can win the whole thing. And they certainly looked like it that day. But since then, we haven't seen anything that was close to it. I would say the closest that we've gotten to that since is probably that fourth quarter against the Colts. And if you go back now and look at the way the Colts finished the season, that fourth quarter might have been more about the Colts than it was anything else. So that is a little alarming that it's been this long since they've played that well. I really thought that they were going to be dominant at Washington and have a little bit of that kind of what they had last year going in the playoffs, where they just have this, 51-24 win or something, and you're just like, well, at least they finished on a positive. So to get owned by that Washington team is the exact opposite. And so I'd say the biggest positive that you could take away from it is that this has to be a week where the guys are going to be super furious by what they put on tape, and there should be no overlooking anything, and they should come out very fired up and wanting to show that was not them in Washington. And if that happens, then that's a good way to start the game, and they should be in a good spot if they can do that. But if that game starts out like the Washington game started out with errors, turnovers, things like that, it could be a very, very long Monday night.
We're talking to Jon Machota of The Athletic right here on 105 Through the Fan. And John, obviously you talked about the fact that if you talk to any of these players in that locker room, they probably wouldn't be able to give you an idea of what their identity is. Being a credential media member in that locker room, what other things have you gotten a sense of, like outside of that one thing, like that is happening in that locker room, whether it be like kind of emotions, the way that they're thinking? What else can you tell us about what's happening in that locker room at this point?
I think that I don't think that anybody has an answer, and that to me is a little alarming. I don't think that anybody knows for sure what it's going to take to get things back on track. Yes, you lose Terrence Steele. Tyler Biadasz was obviously out. Sounds like they will have him back for the Tampa Bay game. But then the way that the running games looked, I don't get the sense that they feel like, they can just snap their fingers and then it goes right back. The way J. Ron Kurtz talked after the game about not knowing for sure why they're not able to put it together again like that. It's surprising to me when, yes, have they had injuries? Yes, they've had injuries just like every other team in the NFL. But they haven't had during this back stretch. You've had Dak back healthy. You've been with Zeke and Pollard and CeeDee Lamb and Schultz, and Zach Martin's been out there, and Diggs and Parsons and Lawrence and all your key players that you would thought, hey, as long as these guys stay healthy, they'll be fine going into the playoffs. There aren't the answers from those guys that you'd expect. There just hasn't. I mean, out of all those names I just mentioned, there's very few of them that are even playing their best ball right now. Where we thought, yeah, this is when they will, is entering the playoffs if you have all these guys relatively healthy. So I don't. The thing that my biggest takeaway is I don't think they know why exactly they played the way they did against Washington. I don't think they have the answers, because if they did, you never would have had even a second half like that against Washington. They would have won it at halftime. And coming off of that touchdown drive where, Dak ended it with the touchdown pass to CD, I mean, they would have built off that, and they didn't come close to doing anything like that.
John, before we let you go here, one question that I do have about this game, because I'm thinking about all the pressure on certain people when it comes to this game and what could happen if certain things don't go right for the Cowboys. Who's in the most trouble if the Cowboys lose this game on Monday night?
I mean, the obvious answer would be Mike McCarthy. But I think Mike McCarthy, Kellen Moore, I don't see it being a players being in trouble thing. Dak's not going anywhere. Mike is not going anywhere. DeMarcus Lawrence, I mean, all those guys I mentioned aren't going anywhere. So, in this league, it's hard to sit there and say they're just going to all of a sudden go in another direction with those players. So if anyone's in trouble, it's going to be members of the coaching staff. And if the offense looks like it's been the way it has been recently, then obviously you point to the offensive coordinator. And if you're Jerry Jones and you have another coach in mind that you think can give you a better chance, then maybe you go in another direction there. I just don't know who that coach would be. That is just the obvious answer that would improve you from where they are right now. I don't know who that person is out there. There's no names out there that I look at and go, oh, well, if this doesn't work out, you got to get rid of Mike McCarthy and hire this coach. They're just that person isn't out there. So I'm not a big person in firing people or getting rid of people just to get rid of them. I need to have a replacement, and I just don't know who that replacement would be. So while it'll make for plenty of articles and talk, even if they lose that game, I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't major changes.